How's it going, everyone? Sam from the People's Gym here, and I wanted to just talk today quickly about lifting belts and breathing mechanics, why we should use a belt, when we should use one, or not use one. But to start with, I'm going to use some balloons. So this balloon here represents your diaphragm or your lungs, or this kind of trunk section when you breathe in and it expands, okay? So in this balloon, it's quite a small balloon. This represents someone who hasn't taken that big breath and hasn't braced before a lift. So let's say, for example, someone's doing some heavy back squats. Now, when they load the bar on their back, we all know that there's going to be now a force that is going to compress down through their spine, through their trunk. And what that force is going to do is it's going to begin to compress. It's going to cause that compression. The heavier it is, the more compression we're going to get. We're also getting an opposing force pressing back up this way. Okay, now you can see, because this air doesn't have a balloon, a lot of air in it, there's not a lot of pressure that's being maintained. There's a little bit, but not as much as if it was a little bit bigger. And so when I begin to place force and begin to squish that together, you can see that there's this kind of bulging out that happens. There's a loss of force. Rather than the balloon pushing back into my hands, it's going out sideways. So there's a loss of force or energy that's happening in that system. Now let's take, for example, a balloon that's a little bit more blown up. And this might represent if you've taken a bigger breath. And obviously it's still limited because I can still compress it. But with more breath, with more air inside here, there's more resistance to being pressed down. There's more what we would call intra-abdominal pressure if this was your trunk. Okay, so as I press now, you can see that there's a lot less bulging out to the side, and there's more force being placed back into my hand because there's more pressure inside. Okay, now let's take that to a model. Let's go to here on the whiteboard. Now, if this represents your trunk, your abdominal cavity, we've got force coming down this side, and we've got force reacting back up that way, okay? Now, if we don't have sufficient pressure, and this kind of represents the 360 degree of your trunk, that cavity that you breathe into, if we don't have enough pressure going back in this way, then we get a loss of force. And so if we want to be able to produce as much force as we can back into, say, a barbell in a squat, we want to be able to produce as much force back this way, back through there. But if we don't have that tension, that abdominal pressure that's helping us maintain that strength, then we're going to get a loss of force outside here. And that's less force that is then going to be exerted into the barbell, i.e. less weight lifted. Okay, so where a belt comes in now, let me grab a red one. Where a belt comes in is if I now put my lifting belt on around there, pretty little lifting belt, okay? If I put my lifting belt in, what that lifting belt allows is another thing to brace against. So now if I breathe into that lifting belt and I breathe out and create that pressure, it's placing more pressure back into the system this way. In other words, it's creating more intra-abdominal pressure. It's allowing me to have a higher pressure in here, which in turn allows me to reduce the amount of energy or force lost laterally and allows me to put more force back up into the barbell or whatever sort of lift I'm doing. So that is at a very basic level why we wear lifting belts and how they operate. So they're not just operating or making us not use muscles. They're really, really important when we want to produce maximal force and basically create as much pressure and tension as we can through that mid-trunk. Of course, that means there's scenarios where we don't want to do that, i.e. if you want to do some flexibility work, you want to do Jefferson curls, where the goal is to create less tension and to more flexibility and more range of motion, then we want to reduce the amount of tension and pressure that we hold. So I hope that gives you a bit of an understanding as to when you should wear a belt and what the effect is that we're looking for.